Hi, everybody. This is I Swear to Drunk I'm Not God, and I'm so very happy you could join me. I know everybody's out there busy. Everybody is out there busy. I am busy. My mother's in town. I'm shopping. I'm shopping a lot. It's expensive. My bank account hates me. Everybody I bought gifts for will love me, but my bank account hates me. But no. So this is I Just Swear to Drunk I'm Not God. This is actually episode 7. I am your host, Britt Perkins, and I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you made time for me during this special, wonderful Christmas season. Christmas season is like my favorite, literally. My absolute favorite. I love buying things for people. Buying things for people is my love language. It's what I do. And it's that time to just be happy, at least for once. If you're going to do it, just be happy on Christmas. You can't figure out how to do it any other holiday. Just do it for Christmas. This is a time of just greatness. It's my favorite. I love it. So with that being said, I suck, and we're going to talk about something terrible during this very wonderful time. We're going to talk today about the kidnapping of Colleen Stan. How did I hear about this? I heard this from another podcast, and I briefly heard about it through probably Investigation Discovery at some point. Once I listened to a podcast, I was like, I've heard this before, but once we get into it, it may trigger you. It may be like, oh, I know what this is, and it may be like, no, I don't know what the fuck this is. This is the most insane thing I've ever heard. But that's what we're talking about today, the kidnapping of Colleen Stan. I didn't really want to talk about another piece of shit. And in this case, 2 pieces of shit, very similar to Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown. If you don't know who that is, go back to episode 6. They were absolutely insane. But I did think about, this was on my list, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. So here we go. What the poison is, though. The poison today is the Negroni. You know what a Negroni is. A Negroni is Campari, gin, and what's the other ingredient? Oh, sweet vermouth. Put it in a cup with some ice, stir that bad boy up, and then pour it over some fresh ice, and you have some Negroni. And then you can slice an orange peel if you feel like doing a garnish and being fancy. I honestly don't waste fruit for that purpose. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not, that's for my restaurant experience. I don't do that when I make drinks. I'm drinking it. I'm not about to decorate it. Sorry. But I do appreciate the mixologist. So I don't want anybody being like, well, what the fuck? No. Absolutely. I respect it. I love it. I just don't do it at home. Okay. On the couch. It's not worth it. Now, so go to wherever you see my little video, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, check that out. If you want to know how to make it super easy, nothing complicated about it. Now, the kidnapping of Colleen Stan. This isn't a fun one. It's an interesting one, but it's not a fun one. So let's get started. Sip. Gulp. All right. Now, Colleen Stan. You know what? First, let me say this. I can't help but notice that the topic of brainwash, that whole, whether or not a person has enough mental freedom, I suppose. I don't know the word. I'm bad with words. I already told you this. To truly fall into a predicament like this and stay in a situation like this, I don't know. I mean, I actually feel like people who have been in abusive relationships or anything like that, they will understand this as a concept, because there are people who've fallen into this situation where, let's say, somebody has controlled their mind without so much force. Sometimes it's just simple. It's love. Sometimes it's just manipulation, just real, but just imagine being beaten. Just imagine being raped. Just imagine being tortured. just imagine all of that. Brainwashing and conditioning is easy when you implement violence. And in this case, and you'll see what I'm talking about, because I kind of just preface this thing with that without giving you any context, and I'm doing that on purpose, but because I want to give you the full story. But I just feel like it's important, because we always have the conversation of whether or not this is ever anything that you or me or whomever, when you're having a conversation about brainwashing or mind control or that level of manipulation, whether or not you could ever be that person that could have that experience. So I'm saying this to say, hold back the thought that this girl is stupid. Hold that. Put a pin in it. It's not worth the negative energy, number one. And number two, even if it was, if you were having this experience, I feel like leave a margin for understanding that this could happen to anyone. This could literally happen to anyone. Who is stupid are the perpetrators, 100%. But the woman who was kidnapped, maybe her choices along the way weren't so great, but at the same time, I couldn't help but be like, I get it. You know? So I'm just going to say that, and we're going to proceed. Now, I'm going to take another sip for Colleen. Okay. Colleen was born on December 31st, coming up 10 days, 1956. Her father, Jack Martin, and for some reason, I couldn't find her mother's name. It was weird. Her father was Jack Martin. Her mother was ? I don't know her mother's name. I really did work hard to find it, and I can't. So, her parents were divorced for 18 years by the time this event happened. Now, when this event happened, which was May 19th, 1977, Colleen was around 21. She was 5'6". She was 135 pounds. They say she was very voluptuous. And in 1977, Hitchcock. Bitch, what? In 1977, hitchhiking was super, super popular because it was cheap. And it made it much, much easier to get around. She was on her way to Westwood in Northern California. Her friend, Linda, was having a birthday party. She left on a Thursday. She was back. She was supposed to be back by that Saturday. She took 2 rides, and she took the 5. If you've ever been to California, they call it by their numbers. Like we call, the I-90, whatever, they call it the 5. They call it the 134. They call it the, you know what I mean? So she took the 5 down to Red Bluff, where she would head east to get to where she needed to be. So in that journey, a car of guys, they stopped. She didn't feel safe because she was like, car of guys. Nope. Good. I'm good. Car full of guys. Bad idea. Good job, Colleen. Fantastic. Because that probably would have been a bad idea. She then was asked by a couple if, she wanted to ride. But then when they found out where she was going, they were like, look, we're only going like a short distance. We're really not going that far. So then she encounters a blue Dodge Colt, and they stopped. There was a couple inside, and the woman was carrying a baby. So, of course, inhibitions lowered. Boom. Oh, she has a baby. These can't be psychos. The man said that they were headed towards Mineral, which would have been in her direction. So Colleen hopped in the car. She was like, fantastic. Cool. I'll hop in with you guys. Now, the man said that there were ice caves while they're driving along. He's like, oh, there's ice caves. My brother told me about these ice caves. We should stop and check them out. And in her head, she's like, don't really have a choice, so I guess I don't mind. So they turned off the highway to a dirt road. Now, the wife stepped away from the car with her baby to head to a nearby stream. Then the husband climbed out, walked over to the passenger side, pulled the seat forward, and jumped into the back seat. Holding a knife to her throat, he tells her to put her hands over her head. Then he put a strap around her head, a gag, and he grabbed her ankles and he tied them up. This escalated very quickly. She was then handcuffed and blindfolded. Next to her was a box. It was a wooden box. The box was made out of wood, but then it was kind of like the size of a hat box, but it was heavy. It was like 20 pounds. What she realized was that it was insulated with carpet, and it was constructed with door hinges so it could open and close. There was also a circular hole. He put the box over her head. So the hole is where her neck was supposed to be. And he closed it. It was tight and it was dark, but he just put her head in a fucking box. So it's choking her because obviously the circumference of the hole is, not big enough. So it's kind of choking her. It's uncomfortable. So she started to panic and she felt claustrophobic as the box and like the carpet interior is making it harder and harder to breathe. He put a sleeping bag over her, called his wife back to the car. This is what he would call the head box. Okay, so once they arrive at home, she was guided to the basement where she was handcuffed to a pipe, and he started to strip off her clothes. And he then replaced the handcuffs with leather bands to hook to the ceiling. Her arms were stretched out wide. Now, I did read a book on this, but I also read the court filings. Since my last case, I was like, ooh, court filings, reading them, free. I'm going to check them out. So I've been reading them. So this is what the court filing said. Quote, that evening, Hooker stripped Colleen and hung her up by her arms from the basement rafters. It was very painful. When Colleen cried and tried to find something to rest her, trying to find something on which to rest her feet, Hooker whipped her. Through her blindfold, Colleen could see a magazine open to a picture of a woman who was hung much like she was. And after she had hung for 10 to 15 minutes, Hooker let her rest her toes on the box. From under her blindfold, she could see Hooker and Janice having intercourse. When they were finished, Hooker removed the box and hung Colleen for another 10 to 15 minutes. Finally, he took her down, placing her in a box in the basement. He chained her wrists, put the head box on her head, and tied her feet to a box. The next day, Hooker took her out of the box, put her on a homemade rack, and chained her wrists and ankles to the corners of it. Hooker left Colleen this way until the following day. During one of her first days in captivity, Hooker gave Colleen a meal that she was unable to finish. Becoming angry with her, he hung and whipped her. And once she finished the meal, Hooker put her back on the rack. End quote. Now you're probably thinking, we 13 minutes in, what the actual fuck is this? Yeah, I know. It's sad. I usually try to give you a little bit more fluff in the beginning, but we're just going to go straight into it because this is where it starts, but it takes a minute for it to end. So we got a lot of information to go through. So hold. Now, Colleen is from Oregon. While all this is going on, Colleen's roommate in Oregon, Alice Walsh, is freaking the fuck out because Colleen was supposed to be back that Saturday, which would have been May 21st. Alice thought maybe she went to Riverside to visit her mother. And on the 23rd, Alex called Colleen's mom to see if she was there. She was like, whoa, where the fuck is Colleen? And by that Tuesday, they called the Westwood police and the Eugene police and filed a missing person report. They filed, but they never investigated. So who are these human sacks of excrement? Cameron and Janice Hooker. They lived at 1140 Oak Street. They were supposedly a nice couple by the accounts of people who knew them prior. They were hardworking. They were quiet. Cameron was a meal worker at Diamond International, and Janice was a housewife. Red Bluff was pleasant. So this is like a normal situation. Now, Cameron was born in Alturos, California, to Harold and Lorena Hooker. He was a quiet and happy kid for the most part, but he was just kind of mediocre, kind of blah, nothing special. When he graduated from high school in 1972, he worked at Diamond Lands Corp, which was a lumber mill. And in 1973, he had met Janice. Janice was young. She was only fucking 15. Now, she was not that cute And she was also super insecure. So she was always submissive due to her insecurities. And, you know, she would kind of really date anybody. I did find in one source that apparently she was abused by her own family. So off the rip, he started like wanting to hang her up. He wanted to suspend her from a tree. That was, you know, that was a date, I suppose. The fuck? So Cameron would take her down. He would love on her. But it was an emotional roller coaster. I mean, she was so scared of him sometimes that she would just hide in the bathroom, which is like, oh, my heart breaks for Janice. Now, Janice did tell her friend what was going on once. And her friend was like, quote, if you figure you can handle it, then go ahead. Which I'm like, thanks, friend. It's like, shit. Okay, you think you got this girl, then do you, boo-boo. It's like, okay, but he wants to hang me from a tree. That's not the same. You know, that's not the same. That's not like, oh, you know, my boyfriend really is like really into anal and I'm not totally sure. Like, that's not that. But then you're kind of like, I mean, girl, if you figure you into it, then go for it. See, if you don't like it, you don't like it. Hanging from a tree and being, nah, that's not the same. So anyway, they got married. She was like, fuck a friend, fuck everything. I'm getting married. So they got married in Reno. They got married in Reno on January 18th, 1975. Now, his experiments on her would become more bizarre and more severe. I mean, Janice didn't want to participate anymore, so Cameron began to get bored. He proposed a third person to join the couple. Now, the third person would be the one to take the brunt of his perversions. Janice asked that he would not sleep with the other person. He can kidnap them, though, but only if he agreed to have a baby. So they got a house, specifically one with a basement, and Janice gets pregnant and has a baby. And while he's planning to, you know, and this is all happening while he's planning to kidnap someone. So he kept a lot of the equipment in the car and would take pictures of like random women while looking to find the right victim. So he kind of was like hunting, which is like, wow, that is the absolute definition of a fucking predator. So one evening, he goes off to work and he hops in the car. Oh, I'm sorry. One time he gets off of work and he hops in the car and he takes his wife and his baby and he hits the road. This was May 19th, 1977, and he ran into Colleen Stan. Now, fast forward. Colleen is hanging in the basement and would experience long stretches of immobility. She was naked, she was gagged, and her head was still in the head box. Now, even though she couldn't move, Janice was apparently scared of Colleen, which I'm like, what the fuck are you afraid of? You know what I'm saying? Like, Colleen's the one that's tied up, spread eagled, hanging from a fucking ceiling, and you're afraid? Like, the fuck? So she would like go downstairs with a shotgun. It was like, first of all, the reason why you're afraid of Colleen is because you're worried that Colleen got down and she's waiting for one of y'all bitch asses to come down to the basement she's like waiting for you with a pipe. That's the only thing that you should really fear. But, you know, as far as I'm concerned, like, as far as the freak Cameron's concerned, he was very resourceful and he knew how to tie knots and he knew how to build. So her getting out was pretty unlikely. So this whole thing of her going downstairs with a shotgun is like, I think it's her mentally making it seem like in a way Colleen was violent or could be violent. And so it would make it easier for her to accept the fact that Cameron was doing these terrible things to her. Like, in a way, Colleen would deserve it. You know what I'm saying? Because really, you're the aggressor. So why would you go downstairs with a shotgun? But whatever. Now, she would be let out at around like 8 p.m. so she could eat. And one day she had to go down to the bathroom. Like, she had to go to the bathroom. She was trying to make noise and she was like trying to, you know, do things so they could hear. So Cameron came down, he cursed her out for making noise, and then he hung her from the ceiling and he started whipping her. And she learned that staying quiet was the best thing she should do. And she just started soiling herself. She was like, look, this is the safest shit. I'm gonna just piss some shit on myself and see what happens. So At this point, Colleen has been missing for over a month, and her parents are making their way to Oregon to collect some of her personal possessions. They had contacted the Eugene police. They had no updates on the disappearance, nothing. Now, it's been 5 weeks, and Colleen has not bathed or brushed her teeth. Her period stopped. She was being tortured. She was being tortured for punishment and for entertainment. He would every now and again do nice things, though, like feeding her twice, which, ooh, thanks. Thank you. He didn't speak much to her. He would let his actions speak. He would ask when he was going to, what she would ask, like, when are you going to let me go? And he would say, pretty soon. So months went by. So she just stopped asking. Now, in the court filing, it reads, quote, during this time, Hooker regularly practiced bondage on Colleen, suspending her from the rafters, constricting her breathing, whipping her, keeping her head encased in the head box, tying her to the rack, shocking her with electrical cords, burning her pubic area with a heat lamp, and immersing her in the bathtub until she couldn't breathe. She eventually asked for something to wear when the weather started to change, and this is 6 months into her captivity, and Hooker started to just like give her things to do. Eventually he would put her in this like small triangular shaped closet thing under the stairs that he called the workshop. Now, I thought it was kind of like that where Harry Potter slept, like a crawl space, but according to the court documents, Hooker built a triangular shaped box that he fit under the stairs. Now, he shackled her and left her blindfolded. And then he would leave her some like walnuts. And then he bolted the door shut. So she was told to remove the blindfold and shell the nuts. She was just fucking happy that she could move and that she could sit upright. So she got to work on those nuts. She was like, I'm gonna do what it take because I'm just happy that I'm not being, stretched out. Now, the following morning, he told her to put the blindfold back on before he opened the door because she wasn't allowed to see his face. He chained her again and put her back in the head box. Now, she would stay in the box all day. She would come out to eat and then in the evening be put in the workshop where she was like supposed to perform certain projects for Cameron and Janice. So she would do things like macrame and like crochet. And then they take what she worked on and sell it at the fucking flea market, which I'm like, slavery. Okay. So at this point, she wasn't a victim anymore. She was now just a flat out slave. Now, Cameron was very big into bondage magazines, and he would sometimes take pictures of the pictures, which I was like, okay, it's kind of like the first screenshot, I suppose. And he was studying them. He was inspired by them. He was subscribed to a newspaper called the Inside News, and on page 6, he read the headline that said, quote, they sell themselves body and soul when they sign the slave contract. This was the headline, and he was inspired. It even provided a sample of a contract, a slave contract. So Cameron and Janice created a slave contract using a typewriter they rented. And at this point, he's trying to figure out how to further manipulate Colleen. So they wrote up a contract with his alias, Michael Powers, as master, and his witness would be Janet Powers. And then he even put a seal with a S with a cross through it. Don't know what that meant. But by 1978, in January, he went to the workshop, which is where she was. And this was the first time since 1977 that she saw his face. He hands her a news article about the sex trade. She learned that women were being forced to sign these contracts and sold into slavery by like this underground brotherhood of slave traders. Now, the slave trade was supposed to be like this large organization, this controlled industry, as we know now, was basically sex trafficking. So Colleen was terrified, and she's now thinking she's being held captive by like this larger organization. So he tells her, they know you're here. And she's like, who? And he goes, the company. The company was a slave trade organization. that now knew that she was there and that she would need to sign this contract. She needed to be registered. He showed her the contract he made, convincing her, and she fell for it. So she told him, quote, "You may have control of my body, but you can never have my soul." This is what she said. He says, quote, "I know, that's God's." Ooh, this is a special one. This is a fucking special one. So she signed the line, forever slave. Now, the company required that she wear a slave collar and that it would cost $1,500 to register her. He told her that he would let her out to do things for him because the company was in charge. They provided, apparently, the security. They were monitoring the phones. If she tried to run away, they would catch her and torture her. He told her that runaways would have their hands nailed to a beam. They would be beaten mercilessly, and then they would be left to hang. So he had decided that her slave name was going to be Kay. She had to now address him as sir or master, and she must call Janice ma'am. Now, she wasn't allowed to look at him in the face, so she couldn't cross her legs. These were the rules. She couldn't cross her legs. She couldn't look at him in the face. She wasn't allowed to do anything but kneel to him when he was asking a question. She had to ask permission to do everything. With the new rules, she could come out of the basement. So he gave her chores. She had to cook. She had to clean. She would be rewarded access to the bathroom. And he would shout, "Attention!" And then she would just have to strip off her clothes, stand on her toes, and her arms were to be stretched out over the archway in between the living room and the dining room until she was told to relax. So Janice was around 20 at this time, and she was so fucked up by the experience, but Janice wasn't completely innocent. Quote, "Janice went to the hospital for knee surgery, returning home wearing a brace. And Hooker told Colleen that Janice had once been a slave who had tried to escape from her master. And when she was caught, he said the company tortured Janice, causing damage to her legs. Janice, fearful of Tucker, was afraid to tell Colleen that she had never been a slave. She backed up Hooker's tale about the company and its influence." End quote. She loved him, but she was confused. Janice started to get really, really jealous. And the agreement was that he could not have sex with his slave. So Janice decided she wanted to test him. So one time, Janice asked Cameron, quote, if he wanted to bring Colleen upstairs to have sex with them. Cameron was like, "Say less." It's okay, let me go get Colleen real quick. So he went down. He grabbed Colleen, and she was completely nude. Colleen was cuffed, blindfolded, and gagged. He put her on the bed, tied her wrists and feet to the bedpost. He then got on top of Colleen, and Janice got so disgusted by this that she started to cry. And she was so sick that she started to vomit. She may have been pregnant though around this time too, but either way, the whole concept just was disgusting to her. So she left to go to the bathroom while Cameron finished. Janice started to put her clothes on. And then Cameron, he was trying to calm her down and took Colleen back into the basement. So Janice felt freaking betrayed. There was no going back after this. Now the Hookers bought an acre of land in a rural, kind of remote area where they could live privately. And they had a trailer that was off this dirt road. And they were not too far from the 5, that expressway. So, Hooker would build a box inside of the platform of their bed for Colleen to live in. And she would enter through the end of the platform where she would just be let out for only an hour. And that was for eating and cleaning. And what I mean by cleaning is cleaning her bedpan, because he gave her a bedpan. And she had decided at that point, she was like, I'm not even gonna cry anymore. Like, she was so desensitized by all of this. She wouldn't cry during her beatings because she realized that he liked it. So she would only cry when she is in the box. That is really devastating. That's very devastating. This girl, this young woman is living in the platform of this couple's bed with a bedpan for 23 hours of the day. Now, mind you, she was also supposed to be staying in this box in the summer months. Like heat, 100 degree heat. It just makes my blood boil to think of this motherfucker doing this to this girl, because it's just disgusting. And this stupid bitch Janice, who clearly, now mind you, she was just so happy that this shit wasn't happening to her that she was willing to just take whatever he was doing. She just did not value herself, zero self-worth, and she just allowed this to occur. It's just disgusting. Now, Janice was pregnant with their second child, so Cameron felt that the child should be born at home, and he wanted to deliver the child. He said he was afraid that someone at the hospital would switch the babies at birth. So, whatever. Fuck, okay. So, he delivered the baby. It was a success, and they had their second child at home, and it was a girl. And this was all in the same bed that Colleen was under, so she was able to hear this girl delivering this baby. Now, it gets to the point where money is so tight that Janice had to get a job, and this was in 1979. She worked at a fast food joint while Janice was at work. Cameron would let Colleen out a lot, and he would only talk to her about the company, but she was allowed out longer periods of time. So he was starting to kind of become a little more relaxed, but she was still doing like her macrame projects, and she was cooking. But Cameron was starting, he was like still pretending like he wasn't like sleeping with Colleen, because Janice thought that he was just beating and hanging her while she was gone, which, that's a great alternative. But he was absolutely raping and sodomizing her. And this is what's crazy too. So they would have visitors, and Janice's parents would stop by often, and so would Cameron's father. And once Cameron's father stopped by unannounced, and Janice had to distract him while Cameron made Colleen more presentable. And he like got rid of all the bondage equipment, and he was like ripping and running, trying to get all that shit out. And so then Colleen was introduced as a friend that helped around the house. He had then told his father that he was going to take her home. So he took her out to the shed in the back, and then he drove around for like 15 minutes to give off the illusion that he had taken her home. And his father was not suspicious at all. He put her back in the box, and when the father left. So that just goes to show that, like, it's like, could you imagine being this dude's father and being like, yo, I'm just stopping by, Bonnie decided she was going to make some pie. And so I was just going to bring up some pie. I was just in the area, nothing serious. And he's like, oh my God, we didn't expect you. He's like, I'll be right back. And fucking Janice is there, trying to distract while Cameron is stuffing this girl in a box. And then he's like driving around the block for 15 minutes like a lunatic. Ooh. So eventually Cameron would let her out for even longer periods of time. She would later call this period, quote, a year out. She would start to even go to town and meet people. She worked in the garden. She babysat. He was still using this company bullshit to keep her trained. He told her that the scars on her thighs were not enough. And since she was allowed more freedom, and he removed her second collar, he would need to do something to her as payment. So he pierced her right labia, and he placed a gold earring in it as payment. So he's so stupid. He's so fucking stupid. I hate this dude so much. So according to the court filing, quote, during her captivity, Hooker committed a series of sexual assaults on Colleen. Colleen estimated that Hooker raped her once or twice a week from March 1980 to 1981, and the incidences that were charged at trial included the following. In September of 1979, while Janice and the two children were at a birthday party, Hooker sodomized Colleen. Between October and December 1979, although it might have been 1980, while Hooker, I keep calling this motherfucker Hooker and Colleen were away cutting posts, he forced her to insert a whip into her vagina. Between January 1979 and October 1980, probably in 1980, Hooker forced her to orally copulate him when she was on the stretcher, and specifically constructed device to which her arms and legs were attached and pulled taut. Between April 1979 and October 1980, Hooker raped Colleen in a shed near the mobile home. Colleen was hanging suspended in the air at the time of this incident. Between March and October 1980, but perhaps 1979, Hooker raped Colleen while she was tied to the stretcher. Between March and October 1980, Hooker raped Colleen while she was tied to the legs of a television set. Between March and October 1980, Hooker raped her while she was attached to a frame, a four-sided imitation of a doorway. In 1980, they let her get dressed to go out dancing with Janice. Now, this was Janice's idea. They danced and drank beer that night, and they even met two men. Janice would go sleep with one of the men while Colleen was waiting with the other guy in another room. Now, at this point, Janice was only around 22, and it's likely that Janice did this to make Cameron jealous, but turns out he didn't give a fuck. He actually gave her permission to sleep with other men. He's like, girl, do you? It's fine. I'm good. I got Colleen. So Colleen was introduced eventually to the neighbors as a live-in babysitter and a maid. They just thought she was poor as hell. She was usually dirty and raggedy, and they would talk to her about gardening, and they let her borrow tools. They just accepted the situation. They're like, I don't know, this is a poor bitch that he hired to garden. I don't know. Maybe she's on drugs. He just didn't know. So Janice, at this point, had got a new job, and she was away from home while Cameron was working. So now Colleen was out without supervision. She was still being abused and raped constantly, but he would never do it in front of the kids. It's hard to raise a family and a slave at the same time, apparently. I've never done it, but apparently it's hard to do. So Cameron started to become a little softer, because he figured his mind control was pretty solid at this point, and Colleen was allowed to write to her sister with no return address, though, and Cameron would also read them before sending them out. So Colleen wanted to see, and she wanted to talk to her family. He let her call her family, and they drove 40 miles out of Red Bluff to a fucking payphone so she can call her family. And when she called, she talked to her sister Bonnie, who didn't even recognize her voice. Colleen would never say where she was, though, and couldn't answer why she hadn't written. So Cameron then told her to hang up the phone. Now, Colleen may have taken a different approach or maybe even felt this way, but she started to show love. This could have been just a defense thing. She told him she loved him. And I think it's just Stockholm syndrome, or it was because he was beating her so bad that she was like, I'm going to just take the softer approach. So he would beat her and he would still rape her, but she seemed to feel like maybe if she expressed this, he would let up. So Colleen would, she would say nice things. She could have loved him because he was powerful, as some women at that time were more submissive and they found power worthy of love. So he told her that she would someday be his slave wife. And the labia ring was a kind of wedding ring. So Janice, she wasn't into none of this. I mean, her and Colleen would start to bicker. They'd start to argue. She was jealous of her. And she also couldn't stand that it had gotten to this point. Janice had bossed Colleen around. They would complain to Colleen about each other. Now he's dealing with two bitches and wouldn't take, he literally took both of them outside and whipped both of them for arguing too much. He told them to straighten up and get along. Now, Jan would have to quit and take care of the family. And Colleen, she would have to go back into the box because Cameron was like, y'all doing too much. So Cameron was getting like, he was starting to spice shit up a little bit. He would allow her to visit her family, which is crazy to me. Crazy to me. You kidnapped this girl. How many years ago? 3 years ago. And you're arrogant enough to be like, yeah, go see your parents. Sure. I'm not worried. Actually, I'm not worried at all. He was worried though, because even though he let her see her parents, and even like talk to her parents, he was still being like, the company would have to do an obedience test. And so he gave her a shotgun and he told her to put the barrel in her mouth and pull the trigger. And she pulled the trigger. Fucking success. The company was watching her and her family at all fucking times. All times. Now, this whole situation is apparently what he told her. Oh, this is all going to cost $30,000. By the way, the company is watching. They're watching us at all times. This is going to cost $30,000, which is a fucking lie. It's a lie. So Cameron, he drives her to Southern fucking California. Now his name is Mike, and he's going to drop her off. While, he's on his way to a fucking computer seminar or some shit. They're supposed to be engaged. This is the story that she's now supposed to tell the fucking family. So her family was like thrilled. They were like, oh my God, we haven't seen her. What's been going on? But then they looked at her and they're like, girl, you don't look good. She was not doing well. They were confused as to why she would leave. So they kind of started handling her with kid gloves because they didn't want her to leave. They didn't want to make her uncomfortable. Her father knew she was happy to be there, but she looked terribly unhealthy. Colleen used to be curvaceous. This is I'm assuming she used to be bad because that keeps coming up. Colleen was curvaceous before, but she wasn't anymore. She didn't look like she had been taking care of herself. So they went to church. Colleen borrowed clothes from her sister, and they visited with her other relatives, uncles, and cousins. She was just doing the whole tour. And after getting back to her dad's house, Cameron called and said it was time to leave. Now, she had only been there for 24 hours. He had told her that she was going to stay the whole weekend. So this is also a part of that manipulation. I'm going to give you a little bit and I'm going to take it the fuck away. That's his thing. I'm going to give you a little bit and I'm going to take it away. I'm going to beat the shit out of you. And then I'm going to be nice to you. You know what I mean? That's how it balances out. And it is no balance. But to a victim, there's some abuse victims. And I was one, right? In a way. Yeah. You don't even justify it. Abusers make it make sense because they're that manipulative, right? You have your really, 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 really bad moments, and then you have your really, 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 really good moments. It's an up and down. It's a graph. It's almost like I kind of equate everything to either drinking or working out. So it's kind of like we're working out. You when you're doing an incline, right? It's mad aggressive and it's hard and you're breathing and it's struggle and it's stress under tension. But then when you release, it's like, woo! So then when you go back to the tension doesn't feel as bad because you've reset. And all of those niceties that these fucking abusers give you are those resets, right? I love you. Remember? Yes, I knocked your tooth out, but remember? I love you. Yeah, I forced you to have sex with me in the shower. Remember? But remember, I bought you. You know what I mean? If you remember, what's love got to do with it? Tina Turner. He was beating the shit out of her and then would provide gifts. Say he did this, do this, do this, do this. And sometimes I think it's also like the polar opposites, the two sides of every person. There's a good side and there's a bad side. Cameron could have been legitimately just like, look, I fuck with you for real. I want to do this nice thing for you. But then he thought about it and was like, that's probably going to get me in trouble. You know what I mean? I think it can go so many different ways. But what we do know that this is a trend with manipulators. I had told an ex-boyfriend one time, I said, this shit has been so bad that I don't even remember the good anymore. Like, that's when I knew it was over, right? You know it's over when you don't tell yourself over and over again that he's not going to do it again. I finally reached that point where I was like, nah, this is who he is. Colleen will get there. She'll get there. But the point is that it's depending on the woman, it takes a minute to get there. And this is why I preface this conversation in this particular episode with, don't just be like, why the fuck did Colleen do this? Because to a certain extent, I consider myself a pretty smart woman. I don't have major self-esteem issues, maybe body dysmorphia, but I don't necessarily have self-worth issues in that way. What I am is someone who cares, someone who fucks with you, someone who tries to see not even just the good in people, but tries to find understanding. And for a person like even me, is that I was dealing with a manipulator that made it make sense to a certain extent. And then it got to a point where it didn't make sense anymore. You know what I mean? And it was like, yeah, this relationship is over. You know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't you too up and down. Some women can deal with the roller coaster. I dealt with the roller coaster for a minute and I was like, I want to get the fuck off the ride. And then obviously something terrible happened in my relationship that kind of added fuel to that fire, which hopefully I'll talk on another podcast about that. But you know, that added a little fuel to that fire to kind of like put the foot in my back to be like, bitch, you need to get out of this right now. This is a problem. And I think that Colleen was young. I'm 36 years old. You know what I'm saying? But if I had dealt with this level of a manipulation in my early 20s, even the manipulation that I dealt with in my relationship that I just got out of in my early 20s, no, there's no telling what I would have actually dealt with, or what I would have allowed myself to deal with, what I would have accepted. You know what I mean? So, you know, I think that it's important to see it that way, not just the stupidity, this girl not thinking. This girl was trying to survive. And there's a certain group, you know, me included, that just can't even imagine that level of humiliation. You tie me up. I'm naked. You raping me. You sodomizing me. I can't eat. I'm not bathing. I'm not this. That's a lot, y'all. That's a lot. This girl went through a fucking lot. You know what I mean? You had somebody who was like, you can go see your family this weekend. And then he was like, 24 hours later, I'm going to come pick you up. What? Now I know what y'all thinking too. She was with her family. This would have been the perfect time to tell them what was going on. But remember, there's that lingering third party that he's calling the company, that he is making it seem like they're this clandestine organization that will murder, torture, they're highly funded. You know what I mean? He had to implement a system to make this work. You see what I'm saying? He couldn't just do it off the strength of what he was saying, because at some point she would have probably just flat out been like, this nigga is full of shit. And then she would have, you know what I mean? Then she would have moved forward. Then she would have started defending herself. Then she would have developed that strength in her head to take care of herself. You see what I mean? But what he did was he mixed in that company shit. The company is bigger than him. He can't control them. And if he's controlling her and there's something that's controlling him, she might as well play the game. She ain't got no choice in the matter. You know? So that's my rant. So what's interesting too about this visit is that someone said, hey, we should take a picture. And they did. Now, I don't know if the picture was that person being low-key precog and being like, something ain't right. I want to get a picture of this motherfucker. I don't know if that's what that person was thinking or what. I think the only thing that kind of infuriates me here too, and I know because parents, especially when women are dating people, it's hard. I think the fact that she was actually there with her father, I can low key, and this is going to sound fucked up, but I can low key see a mom being like, oh, you're leaving? You know what I mean? Because because she probably been in that situation where she didn't want nobody controlling the dynamic of her relationship or who she was dating or having these, you know what I mean? But her fathers are usually mad aggressive and they'll be like, who the fuck is this nigga? You know what I mean? Like, who is homie? Who is he? Where did he come from? Why are you dirty? Why haven't you looked like you eaten? Why do you know what I mean? Why are you looking like this? What is happening? I think that's weird that she actually encountered her father. He's like, I mean, she looked happy, but she looked unhealthy. I would have questions. Whatever. Because I'm like, I think most fathers some fathers, not most, but some be like, I'm going to have to beat his ass because you're not taking care of my daughter. You know what I mean? So anyway, so she was upset and they pulled into the mobile home that Sunday morning. No one was home. Janice was with the kids. She was with her parents and he had her shower and he raped her. And then he handed her the bedpan and was like, all right, go get in the box. This is why we drink. So, I don't know why he did this. I think it's a part of the conditioning. Colleen would be let out of the box rarely for the next 3 years. And you heard that right. 3 years. The neighbors wouldn't see her again until 1984. Colleen is now 27. On December 31st, she was let out of the box, where they showed her a birthday cake and they sang to her. Cameron's at his shit again. He starts to give her those freedoms. He starts to give her those nice moments. And then he's like, never mind. He just rips the rug right from under her. She was released nightly. For several hours. She was cooking her own food. She was writing poetry. She was doing crafts. She was no longer calling Janice ma'am. She could call her by her name. So Janice would let her out for like conversation about religion, but she also just had, just to have conversation because Janice is kind of a prisoner too. She's lonely, but they had so much in common. And believe it or not, their relationship got much better. One thing they definitely shared was that they were fucking terrified of Cameron. So Colleen was starting to gain weight. She looked cleaner. Cameron decided it was best if she got off, she got out of the bed permanently so she could sleep on the sleeping bag in the living room on the floor. That's the penthouse suite. So they paraded her around to others, acting like she's back. Oh my God, guess what? Colleen is back. She's back. Oh my God, didn't you miss her? And then, but the real reason he let her out was so she can get a job. Because he said the company's security fee was $1,500 and he couldn't afford it to pay it anymore. Excuse me. Still sick, y'all. Shut up. That was my chest. That wasn't a baby crying. So Colleen was happy to get a job. She ended up getting a job as a hotel maid. And one day, Colleen asked if she could go to church. And eventually, Jan, Colleen, and the children would start to go to church together. And while at church, Janice was moved by the sermons. So Cameron, he used this to further his own indoctrination by pretending like this was something that was biblical. Genesis chapter 16 is about Abraham and his wives, and that he should be allowed to sleep with Colleen more often and open, and that she didn't like it at all. But Cameron didn't need her permission. It was going to happen anyway. So Janice and Colleen had become terribly close. Colleen would mention the company as she felt bad because she knew it was all a fucking lie. Janice would mention the company as she felt like shit because she knew it was a fucking lie. And Janice started to talk to the pastor about marriage. She learned about the interpretations. She was like, whoa, that is not what he told me. And the pastor's like, oh yeah, well, that's the interpretation. And she's like, wait a minute. So math ain't math. This is what he said. This is what you saying. I believe you. And so Cameron, he was starting to use the fear and the Bible now to keep her in submission. She was concerned that he would eventually kill her. She was like, look, this motherfucker is going to escalate because now I'm starting to question it. So now she's getting worried. So Cameron would talk about capturing more slaves. And that sickened Jan. She was now sick of the lies, and she was concerned about her children. She was like, look, I'm really scared. She couldn't go to the police because she was guilty too. And she couldn't trust anyone. So she feared losing her daughters. If she got into trouble too, they would have no one. So she told Cameron she couldn't take it anymore and that she wanted him to strangle her dead. He obliged. And she could hear her neck cracking. But he wouldn't finish the job, though. She went back to her pastor, presenting like this love triangle instead of slave master relationship and kidnapping and rape and blah, blah, blah. And she started to tell him more and more. On August 9th, 1984, Janice had to do something. She goes to Colleen's job. She asks to speak to her. Janice tells Kay, this is what she says, quote, Kay, I need to tell you something. Cameron lied to you about everything. She told her that the company was a lie. Colleen being a slave was a lie. Colleen was a slave for 7 fucking years. Now Janice crying, asking for forgiveness. Now it's time to talk about the escape, though. Because I'm like, you know what? Let's talk about the escape, and then I'm going to beat your ass later. I'm going to use all of this because I'm pissed. So I'm going to use all this energy to fuck you up. We're going to talk about that later. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, let's figure out the escape. Now I know that you bitch ass motherfuckers have lied. We're going to talk about the escape. So they go to the pastor for help. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The pastor was suggested they spend the night at the home as normal. He's like, just stay at the home. And then tomorrow, when Cameron goes to work, you pack your shit and make your escape. That night, Jan slept on the floor with Colleen. Now I'm like, Janice, you gotta stay on the script. That's not what the writers wrote. Stay on the script. You need to sleep with Cameron like you would normally do. Unless you were sleeping on the floor with this bitch anyway. To sleep on the floor with Colleen is pushing it. You're doing too much. But she did. She slept on the floor with Colleen. The following day, they packed their shit up and they picked up the girls from Bible school and went to Jan's parents' house. They talked about how to take care of the kids, but Colleen knew that she would have to leave. She's like, this ain't me. These ain't my kids. This is her problem. So Colleen instead called her father. She borrowed $100 from her father and she got on a bus. She went to the bus station. She called Cameron. This bitch called Cameron. You hear me? And she said, quote, I just wanted to tell you that I'm leaving. That I know you lied about everything and you can't keep me here anymore. Cameron's bitch ass cried. Now Cameron was in damage control now. He's begging Jan to return home. Her family didn't have all the facts, so they told her to return home too. So she goes back. They started even going to church. They started seeing the pastor for counseling. The pastor was not ready when they started talking about all of Cameron's perversions. And Cameron didn't really want to go to counseling anymore after the pastor told him that he should stop. So one night, Jan was convinced that Cam Cameron was not going to change. He was going to do something terrible. So Janice recommended burning some of the paraphernalia, including all of Colleen's pictures and some of the torture devices, including the whips and the gas mask, which I'm like, I don't want to know what the gas mask was for. What the fuck? What is that for? What you do with that? I don't even want to know. I don't want to know. I could have searched it in the court documents, but I'm about to search it in the court document. Hold on, because I got it as a PDF. Hold on. Damn, I looked in the court documents. There's no mentions of a gas mask. I'm like, what did you fucking use this gas mask on? Okay, anyway. All right, sorry. When I see shit like that, I'm like, what the fuck? That's like mad. Like, that's creative. That's creative. So anyway. So, when Cameron arrived home, when Colleen arrived home, her family had questions. She told her family everything. It was hard for her to like get back to herself because she was so used to being a slave. She had got a job at a hospital. She was like talking to Cameron. She was actually just a janitor / like hospital maid. I think that's what they called him at the time. So don't worry. She wasn't a doctor. Really? She was a doctor? No, she wasn't a doctor. She got a job at a hospital. She would take Cameron and Janice. She would talk to Cameron and Janice over the next several weeks, including asking them how to make a fucking tuna sandwich. Yes, she was still in contact with Cameron and Janice. She promised them that she wouldn't go to the police because Janice and Cameron was claiming he was trying to change. So Colleen resisted. She was like, I'm going to the authorities, even though I'm not going to the authorities. I'm sorry. Even though her family thought that she should have. Her family was like, you should definitely. See, this is me. If this had happened to my sister would have been fucked because I'm going. I'm sorry. I'm going to the cops because this is mean. So Cameron was not really eager to change. He had claimed to have read like in a magazine that his issue was hormonal, which I'm like, motherfucker, you like 40. Shut the fuck up. And he also claimed that in the magazine they said that he needed to drink 1 beer a night. That was going to cure whatever the fuck he was. This dude is such donkey doo-doo. I hate him. So Janice knew something was coming. She knew that he was relapsing. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. She was having panic attacks. She eventually took the girls and she finally left. And so one day Jan went back to the trailer and found that he still had porn everywhere and he was doing like nude fucking sculptures of women and shit. And she was like, confiding in this woman named Connie, who was a receptionist at the doctor's office she was going to. Jan eventually shared her experience with her. She was afraid of her husband, and she's like, he's evil. He gets off on bondage. She tells this woman Connie about Colleen, and Connie realized that this was beyond her skill. She like, yo, I am just a receptionist. Like, this ain't my skill set at fucking all. You should go to police and you should get counseling. So Connie finally said, quote, you should turn him in because he might do something to your girls, end quote. Now this seemed to work. Janice agreed and started talking to the pastor again. His name was Pastor Dabney. He called the sheriff's office at this time. Janice had also said that Cameron had kidnapped, tortured, and murdered a woman in 1976. Now, I'm so sorry about this wheezing. It's not stopping. I do have an appointment tomorrow, so I'll update you next week on my condition. This kidnapped victim, this victim, Marie Elizabeth Spanicky. Now, what's interesting about her, she was actually, please go watch it. It's the 3rd volume of Unsolved Mysteries, the new Unsolved Mysteries that came out on Netflix. she's brought up in that documentary. Mary Elizabeth Spinnaky was supposedly the first victim of Cameron's, and she was actually murdered. From what I read, she was shot in her stomach with a pellet gun. I don't know if that was a part of the torture, and it just ended wrong. You know what I mean? Or if he did it intentionally. And the reason why I mentioned Unsolved Mysteries is because in Unsolved Mysteries, there's actually a supernatural episode about Mary Elizabeth Spinnaky, and it's actually about the daughter and mother who ended up apparently living in her apartment. So I would check it out. I thought about doing a little bonus thing, but I already owe you all a bonus thing on H.H. Holmes, which nobody cares about at this point, that I'm like, I'll do it eventually. At least I'm being honest. H.H. Holmes wore me the fuck out. I can't even. But it's interesting. It's a very interesting episode. I was funny because I was watching Unsolved Mysteries, the new, I guess I love the original, the Rob Stacks episodes. And then when I found out that Netflix was going to be doing it, I was so excited to watch some of those. And some of them ended up being cool. And so I'm like doing working from home and like listening to this story about this girl who, but everything that she didn't say right off who she was talking about. And I was like, wait a minute, this sounds like the girl in the box. And that's what it ended up being about, because they kind of call Colleen the girl in the box. So, but Marie Elizabeth, her boyfriend, I'll explain more, but her boyfriend basically, they had an argument, and, she ended up dead. And, this episode is about the apartment that she lived in, and the girl and the mother being haunted by what they think is Marie. So check it out. It's the 3rd volume of Unsolved Mysteries. It's called, I think it's like Apartment 401 or something like that. So just check it out. It's on Netflix. We all have Netflix. So Janice says that Cameron committed this murder in 1976, which would have been before Colleen. Her remains were never located, so no murder charge was ever brought up. And Marie was 18 at the time. She was reported missing by her boyfriend, who had an argument with her at a flea market. And I guess she had decided, fuck you, I'm gonna walk home. But then she was never seen again. And according to an article I read in Newsweek, quote, Janice Hooker said that she and Cameron had offered Spinnaky a lift home. Cameron prevented Spinnaky from leaving the vehicle and took her to their house, where he tortured her. Janice Hooker told the police she found Spinnaky dead in their basement that evening. She said that she and her husband then took Spinnaky's body to Laysan Volcanic National Park, and they buried her in a shallow grave. During the trial's jury selection, most people didn't even know what S&M was. 5 men, 7 women were selected. The charges were 16 felony counts, kidnapping with a knife, 7 rapes, 1 of oral copulation, 1 of penetration with a foreign object, 1 for sodomy, 3 of false imprisonment, and 2 of abducting to force an illicit relationship. Now, she snitched. Janice went ahead and snitched. Now, when they finally went to trial, it was hard to convince the jury that this had happened at all, and there was no precedence. Also, the statute of limitations on kidnapping was only 3 years. Hooker was charged in 1984. There was precedent in a case called Parnell versus Superior Court in 1981, which means that someone could be prosecuted but for kidnapping, because the kidnapping was continued by the threat of force. So if the kidnapping is continued, that means the crime continues, and it had to be proven that the kidnapping was continuous. So additionally, Parnell versus Superior Court was actually the kidnapping of a 7-year-old, a minor. So the attorney she had to give reason why Colleen would stay. Brainwashing wouldn't work. She thought It was untried except for the Patty Hearst ordeal. The Hearst ordeal was basically when that woman was kidnapped. Patty Hearst was kidnapped and sexually abused, and then she was incorporated into the Sudanese Liberation Army, and then she was forced to rob a bank. Now, Colleen's situation was worse. She was being tortured. She was being tortured worse, and then she was being neglected more often and for longer periods of time. She would eventually move away, though. The attorney would move away from the brainwashing argument. They compared her basically to an infant. Her attachment to her captors was similar to that of a baby. She was forced to rely on Hooker under the threat of torture and rape, and she had to eat, sleep, and use the bathroom when they told her to. The defense argued that Colleen was free to leave when the Hookers moved to the mobile home. So that was the thing too. They were like, well, remember, she lived in the house at first. They ended up moving to a mobile home. Colleen kind of had a little more freedom. She was able to shop. She was able to garden. She was able to work. She was able to talk to others. She was still voluntarily returning to the home. And when she went to go visit her family, she never told them shit. Colleen was in love as far as the defense was concerned, and she was supposed to give Hooker the son that he always wanted. So the question was she really a slave? They had proof of like her, interacting with Hooker and the hookers in general, and one call that she had made to them lasted 76 minutes. So Janice had testified during the trial in exchange for full immunity. She explained the box and all of the tools, and they would eventually show a picture of Colleen Stan tied up. The defense still tried to prove that bondage was not painful and that she was up to it, even though being ordered and begging them to stop was obviously a sign of her not fucking enjoying it. Janice was just like not looking good, but she admitted that she even whipped her. So she would also say that she would consistently say shit like, oh, I don't remember. Now it's time for Colleen to testify. When the box was brought out, the people in the court couldn't even believe it. She said it was tall enough for like the elbow, the box that she was sleeping in, not the head box. She said it was tall enough for the elbow to the tip of the finger. So it's basically a fucking coffin. And then she denied some of Jan's testimony and said that she only told him that he loved her out of fear, that she loved him out of fear. She did admit to feeling a kind of love. She was like, it was a kind of love, a kind of thankfulness. And she was asked why she didn't say anything to her family. And she said it was because of fear. And she was afraid of being beaten or tortured. It was hard to, even then, it was still hard to find her convincing. She was telling her story, but the story was a roller coaster. And she was flat out just too even tempered. People were like, oh my God, you do not look like a girl who was in distress. So the defense felt that no one would believe something so ridiculous as the company. How would the company really even know the addresses to your family? Now, nowadays, we could say the internet, public data, we got a lot of things that could be used. They would spend an uncomfortable amount of time on like this electric shock she received and how tight the hand ties are. They was just basically dragging it out. Quote, first, Hooker contends that the lower court erred by refusing to admit evidence of his victim's prior sexual conduct. At trial, Hooker had sought to admit a writing in which Colleen had described her past. Colleen prepared this document in 1980 at Hooker's instruction in order to avoid being punished. The trial court ruled this writing inadmissible for 3 reasons. It had limited relevance. Section 1103 of the Evidence Code specifically prohibited its admission, and the conditions under which Colleen produced the document satisfied the court that the writing was coerced. And on appeal, Hooker's criticized each of these reasons, claiming that the exclusion of this evidence prevented him from having a full and fair opportunity to establish that Colleen consented to the charged acts, prevented him from proving that it was reasonable for him to believe that she consented to having sex with him, and gave Colleen a false aura of credibility in the eyes of the juror, which is completely bullshit, because at the end of the day, okay, bitch, even if you can say that Colleen consented at some point, if by 1980 she consented and she was kidnapped, and mind you, she was kidnapped, she voluntarily got in your vehicle. Yes, she did. But you then drove her to a creek and then was like, oh, yeah, put this box on your head. You're coming with us. And then they have the box. You still got the box. This is all, excuse me, belch. This is all forced. So even if at some point she consented, she's been hung, she's been beat, she's been starved, she's been forced to pee on herself, she hasn't been bathed, and you're like, I mean, at some point it was consensual. No, it wasn't. She was kidnapped. If technically the consensual, quote unquote, consensual sex starts with kidnapping, it's just kidnapping. It's not, it's 100% fear. It's fear-based sex. It's like, if I don't do this motherfucker's going to be acting mad crazy. So, quote, eventually the jury found that Hooker was guilty of kidnapping with use of deadly weapon, forcible oral copulation, penetration with a foreign object, forcible sodomy, and 6 counts of rape. The only remaining charge, the 7th count of rape, resulted in a hung jury. This count was dismissed. The defendant was sentenced to an indeterminate term, 7 of 1 to 25 years for kidnapping, with a consecutive term of 5 to 10 for weapon use enhancement, to be followed by a 69-year determinate term in state prison for remaining offenses. Hooker filed a timely appeal from the judgment. He received a total of 104 years. Both of these fucking dookies are still alive, with Cameron constantly seeking parole. And as of 2021, the state has been trying to decide if Hooker should be classified as a sexually violent predator, which would have him sent to a state hospital. So Janice moved on and changed her identity, so who knows where the fuck she is. And Colleen is getting through it. She got an accounting degree in 2014, and she tried to move on with a normal life, but of course misery followed her: a string of failed marriages, a troubled child. She's now in jail. You know, she's now changed her last name to her maiden name. She's a social worker. She's a mental health counselor. And she and Jan just don't speak no more. So that right there is the story of the kidnapping of Colleen Stan. And I'm going to be honest, the articles, not even the articles, some of the interviews that I've seen of Colleen Stan, you know, there have been video, documentary shit, investigation, discovery. They've done movies. They've done all types of shit. Colleen is very even tempered. She has a very calm demeanor. Oh. I can only imagine her just being like, you know what? Nothing matters. Nothing matters. At the end of the day, nothing matters. You know, she has been through absolutely the worst things that you could ever imagine and surviving through. People have experienced this and usually get killed at the end. You know what I mean? And the fact that this poor woman, who's very much so still very alive, has been having this experience, been living that, you know, been living with those memories, the thing about terrible memories. And I have a few, they start to flash in your head a lot. You know, they're like, you remember when I did Herbomeister and we talked about like how ghosts are like a residual, and their residual energy just plays on repeat like a tape. When you have a shitty memory, that's how it is, you know. And every now and again you'll get flashes, visuals. And in her case, she is probably sensory overload. There are probably certain tastes. There are probably certain sounds. There are probably things she sees. There's probably things she feels, things that she hear that just I said sounds, but you know where I'm going. That she smells, that she's just like, oh, that reminds me of that. You know, that reminds me of that. That's triggering. And I'm so grateful that she made it out. Unfortunately, Marie Elizabeth, her case was not Marie Elizabeth. Her case was not tried in this process because her body was never found. No body, no case. There's no real proof of like who did it. That's unsolved. So, you know, it's kind of, it's rough, you know, to think about that. There's so many unsolved missing people. I just feel like it is a blessing. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it's a blessing. I don't know. As people, we get upset about the simplest shit. And to hear this woman speak, and I don't know what her personal shit is. She may drink herself to sleep every night. She may be shooting up heroin. She may be figuring it out, But what we do know, this woman is like in her 60s. She's a mental health professional. She's trying to, she's doing these documentaries, having to relive this shit. But she's just so even. So look up some interviews of Colleen. You'll actually be really impressed and surprised by her demeanor. She doesn't even really come off angry, to be totally honest. She's stoic. And I can also see how the jury was like, are you really affected by any of this or nah? You know what I mean? Like, are you good? And it may just be how she's dealing with it, how she's dealing with that trauma. To me, that's on her. You know what I mean? She's got to figure out how she needs to deal with that. It's not up to us to decide how she deals with this. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed your Negroni. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. This is the episode 7 of I Swear to Get Drunk, I'm Not God. And as a friendly reminder, next week, I don't know what I'm doing yet, but next week will be the week where we start going bi-weekly. We start going bi-weekly just for my mental health and for my time, because I do other shit. So thank you for whoever's listening. I hope you learned something from this experience. And I will see you all next week for some more weirdness and some more booze. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. And be nice to each other. That's all I can say. Be nice to each other. A lot of us should be more grateful than we are.